Hey guys, tonight we're diving deep into something you probably never thought would keep you up at night. Medieval dentistry. Picture this. You're walking barefoot down a muddy road, your cloak stinks of sheep tallow, and your molar has been aching for 5 straight days. It feels like a fire is chewing its way through your jawbone. And what's causing it? According to the best minds of the 13th century, a tiny, squirming worm. Yes, a worm. Inside your tooth. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop a comment with your location and local time. I love seeing where in the world you're falling asleep from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your gums are swollen, your breath could flatten a bee, and the local herbalist is out of dried henbane again. Life is pain, and the toothache, well, it's punishment for some past sin, probably. That's what most people think. You might have failed to confess last week or eaten too much pork during Lent. Either way, God's not happy, and the divine punishment has burrowed into your mouth. You stumble to the village church, not just to pray, but because in the Middle Ages, your local priest was just as likely to yank your tooth out as your local blacksmith. Dentistry, such as it was, fell into the lap of whoever had a firm grip and a strong stomach. Priests were literate and respected, but more importantly, they had steady hands from copying Bibles, and they'd seen worse than your jaw. Now let's talk about the infamous toothworm. This wasn't just folklore. It was considered scientific fact by many physicians for centuries. The idea was that little worm-like creatures nested inside your teeth, gnawing from within and causing the excruciating pain. Some early physicians claimed to see them squirming during extractions. Spoiler. They were probably looking at exposed nerves or maybe dead tissue. But once you believe the pain is from a wriggling invader, your cures start to look creative. One method to coax out the worm involved holding a roasted onion or herb over the aching tooth and inhaling through the mouth. The warm fumes, they believed, would lure the creature out, kind of like baiting a mouse. Another popular solution was to place crushed garlic or henbane seed on the gums to poison the worm. Of course, what you got instead was raw chemical burns on already inflamed flesh. Good luck eating gruel tomorrow. And when home remedies failed, you might visit the tooth drawer. This person wasn't necessarily a trained medical professional. It could be a blacksmith, midwife, or even someone who learned by trial and error. There were no dental schools, just word of mouth. Pun fully intended. You'd pay in chickens, cloth, or favors. You'd sit on a stool in the public square, maybe bite down on a leather strap, and the drawer would clamp iron pliers to your molar and start yanking. The pain? Oh, it was fast, but only sometimes. If the tooth snapped mid-yank, well, time for a chisel, or perhaps fire. Hot irons weren't just for branding criminals. They were also used to cauterize open gums and burn out the offending spirit. There's a delightful medieval manuscript illustration that shows a man literally strapped to a bench, while another cheerfully goes at his face with metal tongs. The caption roughly translates to, "A necessary but unfortunate procedure." You think? Interestingly, historians still argue whether toothworms were purely metaphorical or genuinely believed to be living parasites. Some texts treat them as symbolic, while others give detailed instructions on how to kill them with smoke, heat, or even prayer. Either way, the result was the same. Desperate people burning herbs next to their cheeks and begging saints for relief. Speaking of saints, Saint Apollonia was the unofficial patron saint of toothaches. According to legend, Roman persecutors knocked out her teeth with pincers, so medieval Christians figured she'd have a soft spot for aching mouths. If you were in pain, you'd light a candle to her statue, perhaps tie a tooth-shaped charm around your neck, and hope the pain would pass before the fever set in. Meanwhile, dental hygiene was a confusing affair. Some texts advised rinsing your mouth with vinegar or wine daily, sensible if acidic. Others recommended crushed coral, powdered pearls, or ashes of burnt lizard tails. And while most people didn't own a toothbrush, they did own twigs. Chewing on frayed sticks, like the Islamic siwak, was common and not entirely ineffective. But if you were poor and hungry, those twigs might double as kindling. Choices. Quirky fact? There's a record of one monk who swore by rubbing sheep's wool dipped in honey against the gums to soothe pain. Not sure if it worked, but it certainly made him popular with bees. So tonight, you're still reeling from the idea of a blacksmith wielding pliers anywhere near your face, but your day isn't over. Because even if you didn't trust the priest or the tooth drawer, there was always another option: the barber. Yes, that barber. The one who gives you a decent bowl cut and maybe sells dried leeches on the side. In the medieval world, barbers were much more than chatty scissorsmiths. They were barber surgeons, which is just as chaotic as it sounds. These were the multitaskers of the age. Shave your beard, bleed your veins, set your broken leg, lance your boil, and of course, yank your rotting molars. A true one-stop shop for all your bodily misfortunes. You walk into a dusty little shop on the edge of town. The sign outside shows a striped pole, a symbol we still use today, representing blood and bandages. Inside, it smells like old beer and sweat. There's a stool, a bucket of iron tools, and maybe a curious onlooker or two. "Which side hurts?" he grunts, wiping his hands on a rag that's seen better centuries. No numbing gel, no sterile gloves, just a slug of ale if you're lucky, and a firm belief in getting it done quick. The barber wraps a cloth around your head to steady you and wedges his thumb against your jaw. The pincers dig in, grip slipping on the slick, blackened stump. You hear the crunch before you feel it. Tooth gone. Maybe some jawbone with it. Mouth full of blood. And the crowd claps. In some towns, tooth pulling was a kind of street entertainment. Traveling tooth drawers would set up stalls at fairs and markets, offering quick extractions in exchange for coin and the chance to perform. There are records of flamboyant charlatans wearing bright clothes, shouting out miraculous cures, and whipping out rotten teeth with flair, tossing them into buckets like carnival prizes. Some even claim to cure toothache without extraction by touching the gums with a magic tool. Spoiler: it was usually just a hot iron poker with a new name. Historians still debate whether these fairground tooth pullers were quacks or genuine practitioners of folk medicine. Some had real skill. Years of trial and error honed their technique. Others were just in it for the money. One infamous dentist was caught using the same pulled tooth over and over again to show off his speed. He'd pretend to yank, flash the tooth, then pocket the customer's coin and vanish into the crowd before the pain returned. But back to your town. Say you survive the barber's extraction, jaw slightly misaligned, gums forever sore. What happens next? Infection, unless you're lucky. No antibiotics, remember. A tooth abscess that spreads might give you a fever so high you start mumbling to saints and seeing visions. Or worse, it turns septic and takes you in your sleep. Yet medieval people didn't have our modern dread of the dentist. Pain was a constant companion in life. Sore backs from carrying water, infections from minor wounds, aches from bad shoes and worse mattresses. A toothache, however miserable, didn't mark you as unlucky. It marked you as alive. People expected suffering. Many even believed it had spiritual value. Which brings us to bloodletting. Because no matter what ailed you, draining a bit of blood was the go-to medieval fix. Got a headache? Bleed, fever, bleed, stub toe? Guess what? Toothache? Oh yes, definitely bleed. The idea was that your body was ruled by the four humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Toothache. Probably too much heat or wind rising from your liver. A little blood from the arm should balance things out. Or better yet, let the bad blood escape from near the source. Some manuals advised nicking the gums or veins under the tongue. You know, for balance. Occasionally, the treatment included scarification, scratching the gums with a sharp blade to relieve pressure. It usually resulted in more pain and possibly infection. But hey, at least you could say you tried. And if bleeding didn't help, there was always fire. Cauterization involved taking a red-hot iron, often the same one used to stop battlefield wounds from bleeding, and pressing it directly against the gum or cheek. This was supposed to kill the pain at its source. In truth, it probably just burned the nerves into silence while creating new, more urgent problems. Still, the patient would often claim relief afterward, maybe because the memory of the pain was seared away, quite literally. Amid all this, one would think dental tools were delicate and refined. They were not. Archaeological digs have uncovered medieval dental keys, metal tools shaped like modern corkscrews with a curved arm designed to hook and twist a tooth out of its socket. Unfortunately, the key often broke the surrounding teeth too. The entire jaw could crack under the force. Even stranger, some extractions didn't involve tools at all. In remote villages, people would tie a string around the offending tooth and the other end to a heavy door. Slam the dough. You'd think kings and queens had it better. Surely, behind castle walls and under velvet canopies, there were clean beds, soft food, and skilled healers ready with silver tools. Well, yes and no. Wealth might spare you the indignity of having your teeth pulled in the middle of a fish market, but it also brought you closer to an entirely different dental horror: too much sugar. In the medieval world, sugar was a luxury, rare, imported, and expensive. To own it meant wealth, status, and refined taste. Unfortunately, it also meant blackened teeth, like really black. There are reports from the Tudor period, especially later on, that elites were actually proud of their rotted smiles. Not because they liked the look, but because it proved they were rich enough to afford sugar. If you're Eleanor of Castile or Charles the Bold, you're snacking on candied violets, sugar-coated almonds, and spiced pastes made from quince, all lovingly prepared by a court apothecary. It sounds decadent, and it is, but your enamel is waving a white flag by the end of dinner. That molar in the back? It's already halfway gone. Some queens reportedly suffered from such severe tooth decay that they could barely eat solid food. There's a mainstream historical claim that Queen Elizabeth the Mar, yes, the Gloriana, refused to have any teeth pulled, despite raging pain, because she feared losing her regal appearance. Instead, she stuffed her mouth with cloth and powered through diplomatic meetings with a jaw full of abscesses. Imagine giving a rousing speech to Parliament while trying not to scream every time your tongue grazes a nerve. But Elizabeth was far from alone. Court physicians often prescribed syrups and lozenges for sore gums, not realizing they were coating already infected teeth in even more sugar. The logic was, sweet relieves sour. You can guess how that went. Meanwhile, the poor, despite their countless daily miseries, often had better teeth. Their diets were simpler: barley bread, onions, dried beans, and sugar was nearly non-existent. Their toothbrush? Likely a rough cloth or a chewed twig. No minty freshness, but also no caramel-soaked dates every afternoon. Ironically, those with the fewest resources had the fewest cavities. Still, even peasant mouths weren't pristine. Anyone who lived long enough was likely to experience dental decay. By the age of 30, you might have already lost a tooth or two. And by 50, if you still had a full set, you were practically a medical marvel. Now you're probably wondering, what did people actually look like with all this decay? Let's paint a picture. You're a merchant in mid-14th century Florence. You've just returned from a trade voyage, and your teeth, long battered by hardtack and sea air, are loose in your gums. You smile at your wife and she flinches, not because of affection, but because your smile resembles a weathered fence with missing slats, blackened stumps, gaps like grave plots, and maybe a few stubborn yellow survivors twisted at odd angles. And yet, beauty standards were flexible. In some cultures, especially in parts of Asia and Eastern Europe, blackened teeth were intentionally created. The Japanese practice of ohaguro, for instance, involved women dyeing their teeth black as a mark of beauty and maturity. In Europe, though, black teeth were rarely seen as beautiful, unless, oddly, they were attached to someone wealthy enough to afford sweetmeats. Rich rot was still rot, but socially acceptable rot. One quirky tidbit: upper-class women sometimes painted their teeth white with lead-based powders. That's right, poison on purpose. It made the teeth gleam until they fell out, or you went blind, or, died. Meanwhile, in noble courts, physicians devised dental prosthetics made from ivory, wood, or even animal bone. These weren't comfortable. They weren't permanent. They weren't even functional. They were essentially mouth-shaped cosplay, worn for appearances and removed during meals. George Washington wasn't medieval, but even his legendary wooden dentures had a long prehistory of similar horrors. And yet, even in royal households, dental hygiene was shockingly haphazard. There were combs for hair, powders for skin, even perfumed gloves for the hands, but rarely anything just for teeth. Mouthwash existed, in a fashion, brews of rosemary, myrrh, or mint steeped in vinegar, but it was used more for breath than plaque. Some nobles simply chewed spices like cloves or cardamom, not to clean the mouth, but to mask what was lurking inside. Historians still argue whether nobles suffered more dental disease because of diet or because of medicine. Some claim the endless tonics and treatments made things worse, coating teeth in corrosive herbs, ash, or powders. Others argue that the simple presence of sugar, wine, and softer food meant more bacteria, more acid, more decay. Either way, if your portrait was painted with a closed mouth, it wasn't always due to modesty. One 15th century free: so your royal molars have crumbled, your barber's iron key has cracked your jaw, and St. Apollonia's probably ghosting your prayers by now. But don't worry, your local wise woman has a cure. Let's start with something simple. Got a throbbing ache in the back of your mouth? Take a pigeon. Not a cooked one, mind you. A live one. Cut it in half, yes, right down the middle, and press the warm, bloody insides directly against your cheek. The heat, they claimed, would draw out the pain, or the infection, or the sin. It's all a little unclear. But if you're desperate, and many were, you're giving it a go. This is just the beginning of the absurd dental remedies the Middle Ages had to offer. Another gem: a poultice made from baked mouse. Mash it into a paste with ashes, herbs, and vinegar, then apply liberally to your gums. Warm, yes. Soothing? Possibly. Sanitary? Absolutely not. But hey, at least it's organic. Your village healer might also suggest leeches, because of course they would. Just a few tucked inside your mouth or along the jawline to suck out the bad blood. And let's not even get started on the toothache stones. These were small, often polished pebbles carried in pockets or tied to belts, believed to absorb pain if held close enough. Superstition? Sure, but also kind of charming. One common belief was that certain animals had the power to transfer pain. Not just pigeons, dogs, frogs, even moles. Some medical texts suggested capturing a toad and letting it bite you back. No, really. You'd hold the toad to your cheek, let it sense the inflammation, and then release it into the wild, your pain, allegedly, taken with it. Somewhere in the marshes, there's a deeply confused toad with a toothache. And don't forget incantations. Healing chants whispered while you boiled bark or burned bones were as much a part of the cure as the physical remedy. Latin prayers mixed with folk rhymes created an eerie soundtrack to your late-night dental emergency. Meanwhile, if you were a bit more scholarly, or at least wealthy enough to own a manuscript, you might consult the Tequinum Sanitatis, a medieval health handbook based on earlier Arabic texts. It offered advice like, avoid hot baths with toothache, and chew mint leaves for strong breath. Okay, not terrible. Then again, it also suggested drinking wine with powdered stag's horn and ground pearls. So maybe a mixed bag. Historians still argue whether these remedies were symbolic comfort or genuinely believed to work. Some suggest they were psychological, distraction tactics for unbearable pain. Others insist they were born of long, slow trial and error. If enough people swore the roasted mouse ash paste worked, who's to say it didn't? At least for someone? Of course, some of these so-called remedies were preventative. Don't want tooth rot? Boil a goose feather, soak it in vinegar and salt, and scrub your teeth weekly. That's the medieval version of brushing. A bit abrasive? Certainly. Effective? Probably better than nothing. And let's not skip the herbalists, who often had more knowledge than doctors in town. They'd blend sage, rosemary, and myrrh for mouth rinses. They might advise chewing fennel seeds or parsley stems to ease gum swelling. Some even knew how to distill essential oils. Clove oil was a known painkiller, still used in dental products today. Finally, a win. But with every wise woman offering clove and calm, there was always a snake oil merchant peddling nonsense. In London, one popular healer in the 14th century claimed to cure toothaches by waving a flaming torch near your face. If the heat didn't scare the pain away, maybe it just burned your nerve endings into submission. Let's not forget the mouth charms, tiny metal amulets or bone pendants shaped like teeth or animals, worn on cords around the neck. Some had prayers engraved. Others bore symbols or astrological signs. One German charm from the 1200s reads, roughly translated, "Pain begone, by hammer and fire, in Christ's name." Modern dentists might not approve, but as placebo power goes, it probably helped more than pigeon guts. By now, your mouth is full of soot, feathers, vinegar, and shame, but you're still alive. You're still chewing, just very carefully. Meals are now soggy bread, goat milk, and lukewarm broth. You avoid anything crunchy. Apples are a distant memory. Socially, missing teeth had implications too. In many communities, older folks with missing or bad teeth were respected, but also feared. Toothlessness could mark you as wise or witchy. A crone with black stumps in her mouth and herbs in her pocket? Watch out. She might hex your livestock, or heal your gums, or both. One truly bizarre practice? Whispering your toothache into a tree. You'd walk deep into the woods, Place your hands on the bark and speak your pain into the trunk. Tree, take this ache from me. Whether it worked or not, it got you out of the house and away from your relatives telling you to try You've survived the live pigeon compress. You've endured the barber's pliers and the queen's sugar-rotted teeth. Now, let's wander to the quietest place of all, the medieval graveyard. It's a chilly morning, and the mist curls between crooked tombstones. You walk among mossy markers, some barely legible, others carved with skulls, bones, or angels. Underneath each lies a story, and very likely a set of painfully worn teeth. Thanks to archaeology, we can now peek inside those stories. Exhumed skeletons tell us what no monk ever wrote down. Medieval mouths were disaster zones. Broken molars, abscess scars, exposed roots, jaws that had been reshaped by decades of chewing tough bread and drinking from wooden cups filled with grit. Cavities? Oh yes. But the real horror comes from the bone infections. Those leave marks even centuries later. There are skulls where an abscess drilled straight through the jawbone. Others show signs of aggressive removal, teeth ripped out with such force that the sockets fractured. And sometimes, nestled near the remains, archaeologists find the very tools used. Rusted iron hooks, bone-handled pliers, a bit of string. These weren't just functional, they were treasured, passed from one generation to the next like family heirlooms. This, you imagine someone whispering, was your great-grandfather's tooth key. Still works. Even more telling are the teeth that were never pulled. Rotten, black, and clearly infected, yet left in the mouth. Why? Maybe the person couldn't afford treatment. Maybe they were terrified. Maybe they believed the pain had spiritual value, a kind of suffering that cleansed the soul. Or maybe they just didn't know anything different. Pain was normal, inescapable, unavoidable. And yet, in the art and writing of the time, teeth held strange symbolic weight. In many medieval paintings, toothless figures were villains or fools. Think of those wild festival masks or illustrations in church manuscripts. Exaggerated mouths, missing teeth, drooling jowls. They signaled chaos, evil, or madness. On the flip side, saints and angels were always painted with closed lips, as if to hide the wreckage of mortality. Heaven was neat, silent, and clean, no toothaches allowed. One fascinating example? The dance macabre. A popular theme in late medieval Europe, this series of paintings and poems showed skeletons leading people to the grave. Kings, knights, bakers, barmaids. Death came for all, and often those skeletons grinned wide, empty smiles, a not-so-gentle reminder that everyone ends up with no teeth eventually. Even sermons got in on the symbolism. Priests would preach that bad teeth were the result of moral decay. Lied to your neighbor? That molar knows. Cheated at the market? Better check your gums. There are records of traveling friars holding up rotten animal teeth during fire and brimstone speeches, shouting, "This is your soul," and it didn't end with death. Some medieval cemeteries included rituals to protect the dead from wandering spirits. In Eastern Europe especially, archaeologists have found bodies buried with stones shoved into their mouths. One theory? These people were suspected of being revenants, souls who might rise from the grave and spread illness. The stone was meant to stop them from biting anyone. Even in death, the mouth was seen as dangerous. Historians still argue whether these burial practices were symbolic or actual fear responses. Was the stone just a metaphor for silencing sin? Or did villagers truly worry that Uncle Gregor might return with his cursed molars and bite the children? The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. Symbolism with a dash of panic. Interestingly, some graveyards have also revealed evidence of dental modification. A few skulls from wealthy burials show notched or filed teeth, possibly cosmetic, or perhaps to secure early dentures. These makeshift replacements were sometimes wired into the jaw with gold or silver. Sound fancy? Think again. They often caused severe infections because the materials weren't sterile and the wires cut into soft gum tissue. But hey, at least you looked impressive at court until you keeled over from sepsis. And speaking of legacy, some medieval dental beliefs survived far longer than they should have. The idea of toothworms lingered well into the 1700s. The same goes for bloodletting, charm bags, and holy tooth relics. In fact, there's a church in Italy that still claims to possess a molar from Saint Apollonia herself, enshrined in gold, displayed during toothache season. Pilgrims come, light candles, and pray that their root canals go well. The faith is real. The molar? Jury's out. But maybe the strangest legacy of all is how little we've changed. Sure, we've got fluoride and dental insurance now, but the primal fear remains. That sharp pain in the jaw. That grinding sound as a drill approaches. The flash of a white coat. It's all part of a long, shuddering human history that links you. Let's slow down now. You've trudged through muddy markets and royal feasts, suffered barber's chairs and boiling mouse paste, and stood among the grave markers of forgotten villagers. The echo of toothache's past begins to fade. Your jaw loosens. Your shoulders fall into the mattress like flour into a sack. All around you, the sharpness of the medieval world softens. Iron tools rust into silence. The saints close their tired eyes. Even the toothworms, imaginary or not, curl up and vanish into myth. There's a stillness to these final moments, the kind found only in old cathedrals at dusk or quiet woods after snowfall. You're not in pain. You're not worried. You're simply here, drifting through the stories of people who lived and bit and laughed and winced, just like you. And like you, they all wanted peace, a soft place to rest, a gentle end to the day. Breathe in. Let the past settle around you like dust on parchment. Breathe out. Let it go. Maybe you still hear the sound of footsteps on cobblestone. Maybe the scent of vinegar and rosemary lingers just faintly. That's okay. Let them fade. You're safe now, in this quiet place between history and sleep, where nothing hurts and everything waits patiently until morning. So rest, dreamer. Let the past hum softly in your ear and carry you through the night.